Welcome and thanks for joining our webinar, YubiKey Smart Card Mode for Computer Login. My name is Alex Jakubov and I'm the Marketing Director at Yubico. Joining in today's webinar is David Maples, one of our Senior Solutions Engineers. Just some quick housekeeping before we dive in. Today's webinar will run approximately 30 minutes with time at the end for questions. You can go ahead and submit those questions anytime in the GoToWebinar question panel. We'll do our best to get through as many as possible, but if you happen to have a question we can't get to, we'll be sure to have someone reach out. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with some background, and Dave and I will talk about the advantages of multi-protocol. Then we'll dive into the end user experience demos, followed by best practices for configurations. We'll give a little plug on some integrations for those of you that are hoping to pair the YubiKey with another service. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So we founded Yubico in 2007 with a prototype of our YubiKey invention and the mission to make secure online identities truly ubiquitous. With support from thriving developer and integrator communities, the YubiKey is used for a range of enterprise, open source, and consumer applications, including remote access and VPN, online services, computer login, and password management. Our solutions have been proven by millions of users and more than 100,000 customers in 150 countries, ranging from individuals to 9 of the top 10 internet companies. Our vision is to enable internet users to have a key for securing access to any number of services from any device they choose. To realize this dream, we've developed our next generation YubiKey in close collaboration with internet thought leaders, and we're a key contributor to the FIDO Alliance U2F, Universal Second Factor, Open Standard Specifications. Now today we're really going to focus on computer login and specifically smart cards. Okay, so let's start with the authentication landscape. Compromised identities have reached a level where the weaknesses in static passwords and software-based mobile authentication have been exposed, and more secure hardware authentication devices are too complicated and expensive to scale for the majority of businesses and users. Historically, there's been a trade-off between ease of use and security. Most often we hear people say two things. The first is security is never stronger than its weakest link, and for many organizations, that's its users. And two, the more secure something is, the more difficult it must be to use. If your users are like most, you've got a range of technical and non-technical employees, and all of them are moving 1,000,000 miles a minute trying to run the organization. Friction just won't cut it anymore. They'll find ways around it, or they'll grow to resent the IT department if they haven't already. So for passwords, that's using the same one across multiple services. So moving up the quadrant then in security is software, which many people use from their phones. Although theoretically easier because, hey, everyone's got a smartphone, there's a cost barrier there for businesses that choose to roll them out versus the BYOD scenario. For businesses that do allow BYOD, their users are exposing their personal life with the business, which has its own risks. Now, all that aside, regardless if it's deployed by the business or BYOD, you've got a challenge when phones are lost or have run out of battery. We've also seen an increase in attacks on smartphones and apps over the years, and we get a ton of feedback from our customers, a lot of call centers actually, who say that they don't allow phones in the workplace at all. So those just aren't options for a lot of people. Going further up the quadrant in security, then are hardware OTP tokens and smart cards. Traditional smart cards are time consuming to set up and maintain and expensive because you've got to purchase the reader, the key, and the compatible third-party software. Hardware OTP tokens, very similar. You've got to purchase the token, and then there's a third-party software which you're licensing. And if you've deployed smart cards or OTP tokens before, you get hit with a bill each year for licensing that third-party software. That's where the YubiKey comes in and changes everything. So moving to the right in the quadrant, our multi-protocol keys leverage open standards. That means we eliminate the need to purchase software. And even if your users' computers lack a built-in smart card reader, that's okay because there's one already built into the YubiKey. These little keys pack a whole lot of functionality, and I don't want to give away too much, so I'm going to pull in David now. Can you start us off by talking about what the YubiKey offers?
Maybe. So The YubiKey is a true multi-function, multi-authentication device. And just as the YubiKey supports a number of different protocols, we understand that there's a number of different form factors required to meet use cases. The standard YubiKey, the YubiKey 4, fits directly inside a USB port and can sit on someone's keychain, making it a very popular form factor for those who need to move around or authenticate to multiple devices. The YubiKey 4 Nano fits completely inside a USB port, making the host machine very secure and a single point of authentication for secured networks and devices. The YubiKey Neo uses NFC in addition to the functions over USB to allow authentication on mobile devices. All of these YubiKeys support all the protocols of the YubiKey, smart card, one-time passwords, and other authentication protocols, allowing it to be a true multifunction device that can be used interchangeably. The YubiKeys are actually manufactured in Sweden and the USA. This is to ensure that they are maintained to the highest standards, not just physically, but for security as well. The YubiKey represents a unique design composed of a high-strength plastic resin securely and completely encasing the components inside. No internal spaces, no moving parts, no internal batteries. This makes the YubiKey practically indestructible and very long-lived. I'd like to say that we don't know the full lifespan of the YubiKey because the first generation devices released back in 2008 still haven't died in mass. The unique features of the YubiKey allow for custom programming of over 50 YubiKeys in under 3 seconds. And what's more, customers can load their own secrets. They can generate them, load them on their YubiKeys, and use and deploy those YubiKeys without Yubico knowing anything of what's loaded on them. This means that even if Yubico was a target for attacks, your secrets remain secure, completely in your control. As I mentioned before, the YubiKey is a true multi-function, multi-protocol authentication device. In one device, a YubiKey 4, a YubiKey Neo, or a YubiKey Nano, you get 2 one-time password configuration slots, which essentially allow it to act as 2 one-time password devices. You have an OpenPGP applet, which allows it to be used as an OpenPGP smart card. You have a U2F applet, which allows it to be used as a U2F authentication device. And you have a TOTP challenge response applet, which allows it to be used as a challenge response device. And most importantly, it also acts as a PIV-compatible smart card used for authentication into Windows Enterprise machines or Mac OS Sierra. All of these functions exist on the same YubiKey simultaneously. You can set all of them up and use them for multiple systems without impacting any function of the YubiKey itself. So let's take a closer look at the PIV function of the YubiKey. The YubiKey's PIV function, or personal identity verification, is based on federal NIST open standards. This means that it's supported natively by any solution which integrates these open standards, including Windows, Mac OS X Sierra, and open source projects available to Linux and other distributions. The PIV function of the YubiKey supports open source tools as well as PKCS11 or OpenSC. The YubiKey works as a smart card over both USB as well as NFC for supported Android devices. When plugged into a computer, the YubiKey identifies not only as a smart card, but also as a smart card reader, meaning that it requires no additional hardware, no additional software, no additional middleware, or no additional drivers. It just plugs it in and works. It can be used for a whole host of smart card related activities, including code signing, login, SSL certificates, and other smart card providers. But what sets the YubiKey apart from other smart cards on the market, it has a unique touch to sign feature. Just like you can touch the button on the YubiKey to indicate that you wish it to perform a function, such as generating an OTP code or responding to a challenge response interaction or U2F interaction, you can also configure your YubiKey to require a physical touch to start any smart card operation, signing, authentication, or anything like that. This ensures that even if your YubiKey is left plugged into a machine, a malicious attacker cannot trigger a smart card operation without your physical consent by touching the YubiKey itself. We're now going to walk through some of the demos using the smart card function of the YubiKey. both to log into Windows using a domain account. We're also going to log into a remote session. And finally, we're going to cap it off with logging into Mac OS X Sierra. When using the YubiKey to log into a Windows account, it first must be connected to a domain. Once you log in, you'll need to plug your YubiKey in. It'll identify itself as a smart card, plugging it in, at which point you'll enter your PIN. Upon entering the correct PIN, you'll be authenticated and logged in. When used for Windows domain login, all the user administrators need to do is set up the authentication provider, the certificate authority, to allow for smart card authentication, and then distribute the YubiKeys to their users. There's a whole host of ways that users can load these certificates and register the YubiKey with their credential authority, which we will discuss later in this webinar. The advantage, of course, being that unlike smart cards, no additional hardware is needed to be deployed or maintained, and it will work with any Windows machine that has a USB port. Now we're going to take a look at logging into a remote session, a remote desktop, like logging into a local account on a domain machine. You will first need to plug your YubiKey in and type in your PIN. This will gain access to your account. You will then connect to the remote machine using the native tools, and you'll see that your YubiKey shows up as a login option. Enter your PIN again, hit OK, and you will authenticate via the smart card. The smart card credentials are passed natively through the Windows RDP tunnel to the remote machine, allowing you to log into secured accounts on the remote machine as well as your local client. All of this is set up exactly the same way. There's no requirements necessary to extend smart card authentication from your host machines to your remote machines. We're now going to take a look at the OS X experience. With OS X, there is no domain-connected authentication. Everything happens locally. You plug your YubiKey into your machine, and it immediately identifies the account loaded onto the smart card. You type in your PIN, the YubiKey is authenticated, and allows you to log into your account. All this is done using the smart card authentication and native support on OS X. So you've just seen how easy it is for users to log in using the YubiKey. Of course, in order to have such a seamless user experience, it does require some setup beforehand. For setting up on Windows, you will need to distribute your users YubiKey 4s, YubiKey 4 Nanos, or YubiKey Neos. You can use any of these or all of these interchangeably. You will need to have an Active Directory set up in which your users' accounts are existent. This Active Directory will also need to have a certificate authority. Your clients' machines will need to be at least Windows 7 or above, and you'll need to be running Windows Server 2012 and above. For complete step-by-step instructions on setting up your CA using smart card templates and settings already available in Windows, we have a knowledge base which lists every step necessary to do so. For setting up Mac, since everything is local, you need a little bit less. As always, you will need a YubiKey 4, a YubiKey 4 Nano, or a YubiKey Neo. You will need the latest version of Mac OS X Sierra, and the YubiKey PIV Manager in order to configure your YubiKey to load the smart card certificate on it. The step-by-step guide for doing so is available in the Yubico knowledge base at the link below. The latest offering from Yubico for Windows authentication is Windows 10 Hello. In Windows Hello, Microsoft has done something that they haven't done before. They've exposed part of the authentication under the hood to users or entities who wish to extend that to services such as the YubiKey itself. You can download an application from the Windows Store very soon from Yubico, and at which point, once it's installed, you can simply run the application, plug in your YubiKey, register the YubiKey to your application. From that point forward, that YubiKey is now linked to your account. Whenever you wish to unlock your computer, simply having the YubiKey plugged in and identified allows you to log in seamlessly. A simple touch, and you're in. It's just that easy. Of course, we've discussed all of the native support of the YubiKey in Windows OS X. We also have support in Linux with free open source tools, including our Linux PAM module. However, the YubiKey is not just limited to native support in these offerings and OSs. There's a whole host of services which support the YubiKey, allowing you to extend the YubiKey's functions, smart card functions, such as with Centrify, which allows you to extend the Windows-style smart card authentication for domain accounts to OS X devices. You can also use it with entities such as Google, Amazon, or Salesforce using the new U2F protocol for strong authentication online. For single sign-on, you can use solutions such as Okta or Ping Identity. Or if you have a security provider such as Duo, RCDevs, or Strong Authentication, you can use the YubiKey with those services to perform even stronger authentication. There's a whole range of integrations supported by the YubiKey, which you can see on our website. With all the YubiKey can do, of course, the leading question in many people's minds is what happens if you lose your YubiKey? Well, we like to consider the YubiKey just like you would your physical keys to your house or your car. Common sense is key here. First, just like with anything, make sure you have a backup. Just like you have a backup house key hidden under the rock beside your door, don't worry, we won't tell anyone, you should have a separate YubiKey stored in a secured location in the event your primary one gets lost or stolen. You can also combine the YubiKey with other second-factor authentication options supported by the services you use it with. Mobile apps, SMS, security backup codes, and the like. Just take a note here. Every time you add a backup authentication method, you add another vector for malicious entities to attack your solution with. Please keep these to a minimum or with equally strong authentication. Of course, this doesn't do you any good if the YubiKey is lost for good or stolen, at which point you can either remove the YubiKey yourself from services or with solutions such as Windows Certificate Authority, contact your user or administrator to remove the certificate loaded on the YubiKey directly and issue you a new one. Of course, the YubiKey is only part of a true two-factor authentication solution. Just as unlike when the password's exposed, your accounts become compromised. With the YubiKey, if your YubiKey is stolen, your password or PIN still needs to be known before anybody can use it to authenticate. This buys you time to revoke the YubiKey as authentication solution and issue a new one, thereby protecting your account even further. So I'm sure you have lots of questions and we'd love to take them from the audience. Please feel free to submit them and we'll answer them as soon as they come in.